Good morning. We are on September 14th. It is Monday morning, and I hope you guys had a great weekend. Um, I had a pretty good one, but we want to touch base again and kind of pick right back up with our story. Some of your answers were super, super, super good. Over the weekend, I had some time Friday to go through some of those. And then I went through some more of those late Sunday afternoon. Um, and like always, we had a little bit of struggle between 3 and 4 for some of you. Um, and I gave you comments to kind of help guide you to make corrections in your reading journals. So just kind of throwing that out there. But one of the things that we learned, sorry, my hearing aids reverberating in my ear. One of the things that we really are learning about Brian, and what we're learning is considered a character trait that goes with our end in mind, is that Brian has a strong sense of wanting to live. He's showing us time and time again that he's not ready to die. And so we want to think back into the chapters so far, and what are those examples? Well, for me, the first example of he has a strong sense of wanting to survive is after the pilot dies, he makes himself get the headset and the transmitter so that he can start talking to the tower. That took a lot of perseverance on his part, for me, because I don't think I probably could as an adult, but as a kid, it would be very difficult for me to have grabbed that headset off of him. So I think that's a really good indicator that he's not just given up, and he's not in a corner on the plane going, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to die." That probably might be me, or I might be in a corner saying my last prayer. But he has such a strong survival mode going on. Then he shows it to us again when he's trying to come up with a plan of, okay, what am I going to do when the plane runs out of gas? He's coming up with a plan of where does he think is the best place to land the plane? How is that going to look? Where am I going to go? And then it's not just where am I going to go, but how am I going to do it? So now he's figuring out, how is he going to fly the plane to the landing so that he doesn't die? All three of those are huge indicators of what kind of person that Brian is. So we're drawing conclusions from the evidence in the story that supports this character trait. Now, if I had looked at the book and thought, he's probably athletic, does any of our evidence so far show us that he's athletic? It doesn't. Doesn't mean that he's not athletic, but our evidence does not support that as a character trait. Our evidence shows us that he has a strong sense of wanting to live, and that's what we're looking at. The story is a great story, but we want to learn skills from the story. And so we have to think about, what is our story showing us? So we're almost like little detectives at this point. Now, vocabulary. We want to keep in mind that at the end of our lesson, or the last thing that you're going to do today, is that you will be doing Quizlet for at least 10 minutes. Some of you all are doing more than 10 minutes, which is phenomenal. It's kind of addictive once you kind of figure it out and you kind of get in there. Then when you figure out that you can play against a friend, trying to get high scores and that kind of thing, it kind of makes it a little more fun. So if you've not tried out some of those types of games, please do so. But for vocabulary's sake, we have lashed, which is tied. We have grimacing, which is making a pained face. We have audible, which is able to be heard. So some of his transmissions over the speaker, they were audible. They were able to hear him on the other side. We have a spasm, which is a cramp. Rigid is where something is stiff. Rebelled is resisted. We have visualize, which is making that mental picture. And we have abated, which is lessened. So as we are going through our readings, if we were in class, I would have you at this point at the beginning of the year start finding vocabulary as you're reading so that you could reread that sentence that went with the word to figure out how are they using it in the text. It's because a lot of words have multiple definitions, and the definition and the sentence that works with the word depends on the context that's going on in the story. So that's something I kind of want you to be aware of, whether you are reading from a book, because some of you all on Open House did choose to take a book home with you, or whether you're reading online, the attachment. Be mindful of where you're running across those words so that you can see how it's being used in context. It is important. All right, so we're going to get back in our book. Let's go to chapter 3. If you are wanting to read silently, I would suggest that you wait until I finish with chapter 3, because there's some questions that I'm going to ask, and I want you to write what you think the answer would be in your journal, okay? And so you're going to need to have that journal with you. And if you jump right into reading silently, you're going to miss the questioning. The questions go back to our end in mind, okay? Chapter 3. I'm going to die, Brian thought. Going to die, I'm going to die. Going to die. His whole brain screamed it in the sudden silence. I'm going to die. Well, he wiped his mouth with the back of his arm and held the nose down. And the plane went into a glide, a very fast glide that ate altitude. And suddenly, there weren't any lakes. All he had seen since they started flying over the forest was lakes, and now they were gone. Out in front, far away at the horizon, he could see lots of them, glittering blue in the late afternoon sun. But he needed one right in front. He desperately needed a lake right in front of the plane, and all he saw through the windshield were trees, green death trees. If he had to turn, he didn't think he could keep the plane flying. His stomach tightened into a series of rolling knots, and his breath came in short bursts. There! Not quite in front, but slightly to the right, he saw a lake, an L-shaped, with rounded corners, and the plane was nearly aimed at the long part of the L, coming from the bottom and heading to the top, just a tiny bit to the right, and he pushed the right rudder pedal gently, and the nose moved over. But the turn cost him speed, and now the lake was above the nose, and he pulled back on the wheel slightly, and the nose came up. This caused the plane to slow dramatically, and almost seemed to stop and wallow in the air. The controls became very loose-feeling and frightened Brian, making him push the wheel back in. This increased the speed a bit, but filled the windshield once more with nothing but trees, and put the lake well above the nose and out of reach. And for a space of 3 or 4 seconds, things seemed to hang almost to stop. The plane was flying, but so slowly, it would never reach the lake. And Brian looked out to the side and saw a small pond, and at the edge of the pond, some large animal. He thought a moose, standing out in the water, all so still looking, so stopped. The pond and the moose and the trees. And as he slid over them, now only 300 or 400 feet off of the ground, all like a picture. Now, I want you to think about this question, and I want you to jot down what you think the answer is. So, what do we learn about Brian from his response to running out of fuel? And I don't want you to say he has a strong sense to live, okay? Because that's not where I'm going with that, okay? That is but one character trait. And in any story and in any person, we are more than just one thing. Okay? I am more than just a teacher. I'm more than just a good friend. I'm more than um, being non athletic. So Brian is more than just, he has a strong sense to live. So, what else is it that we learn about Brian from him running out of fuel? Just jot down the first thing you think of. Okay. And it's okay to be wrong, and your idea may not match mine, but that does not mean your idea is wrong if you can back it up with evidence. Okay? It's all about the evidence. One thing that I learn about Brian is that he's logical. And what that means is that even in great stress, and he is under a ton of stress right now, trying to figure out, how am I going to land the plane? Okay, there's a lake. It's got the L. I can land in the L. And then when he realizes that can't happen, he didn't have a freak out and go, I'm going to wreck, I'm going to die. He didn't do that. He started thinking about what else or where else can I land this plane. And he sees the pond. So he's logical. So he's rethinking his plan on the fly. You know, how am I going to do it now? Where am I going to go? To me, that's the evidence that stood out to me. So, if anybody wants to share a little later in the stream what you picked and then what was your evidence, and maybe we can talk about it. All right, here we go. Then, everything happened at once. Trees suddenly took on detail, filled his whole field of vision with green, and he knew he would hit and die. He would die, but his luck held, and just as he was to hit, he came into an open lane, a channel of fallen trees, a wide place leading to the lake. The plane, committed now to landing, to crashing, fell into the wide place like a stone, and Brian eased back on the wheel and braced himself for the crash. There was a tiny bit of speed left, and when he pulled on the wheel, the nose came up, and he saw in front the blue of the lake. And at that instant, the plane hit the trees. There was a great wrenching as the wings caught the pines at the side of the clearing and broke back, ripping back, just outside the main brace. Dust and dirt blew off the floor into his face so hard he thought there must have been some kind of explosion, and he was momentarily blinded and slammed forward in the seat, smashing his head on the wheel. Then a wild crashing sound, ripping of metal, and the plane rolled to the right and blew through the trees, out over the water and down to slam into the lake. Skip once on water as hard as concrete, water that tore the windshield out and shattered the side windows, water that drove him back into the seat. Somebody was screaming as a plane drove down into the water. Someone screamed tight animal screams of fear and pain. And he did not know that it was his sound, that he roared against the water that took him, and the plane still deeper down into the water. He saw nothing but sensed blue, cold blue-green, and he raked at the seatbelt batch, and he tore his nails loose on one hand, and he ripped at it until it released, and somehow the water trying to kill him, to end him. Somehow he pulled himself out of the shattered front window and clawed up into the blue, and he felt something hold him back, felt his windbreaker tear, and he was free, tearing free and ripping free. But so far to the surface, and his lungs could not do this thing, could not hold and were through, and he sucked water. He took a great pull of water that would finally win, finally take him, and his head broke into light, and he vomited and swam, pulling without knowing what he was and what he was doing, without knowing anything, pulling until his hand caught at weeds and muck, pulling and screaming until his hands caught at last in grass and brush, and he felt his chest on land. He felt his face in the coarse blades of grass, and he stopped. Everything stopped. A color came that he had never seen before, a color that exploded in his mind with the pain, and he was gone from it all, spiraling out into the world, spiraling out into nothing and nothing. I want you to think about this question. What do we learn about him from his response to the crash? What do we learn about him? It's a combination of that wanting to live and being logical. It's those two things together. As the plane is going down into the water, he's surrounded by this water. And instead of going, well, peace out, I'm dying, he's trying to figure out, how do I get out of this plane? I mean, he's ripping at the seatbelt, and he actually rips the nails off his hands till he gets it out, and he's trying to swim up to the top, and something's holding him back. And instead of saying again, peace out, I'm dying, he rips the jacket off, and he's swimming to the top, and he's swimming to the top, and his lungs are saying, I'm out of air, dude. But he doesn't give up, and he finally sucks in water, but he breaks the top. Then he's got to swim to the shore. So what we learn from him is, even under all of this stress, he's not giving up, which is what we want. We want him to continue that fight and to continue moving and living. So he's showing us those things. All right, now we get to walk to the front of the room. So, those of you who are wanting to read independently, well, you all are going to be reading independently. Let me rephrase that. But we want to look at our questions first, okay? We are still modeling how to break questions down. So, just like before, got to bear with me, guys. I forgot to bring something to keep me from falling over. Let's see if this will do it. Yeah, that should help. All right, so we want to keep in mind that some of these questions seem very cut to the point. However, it's all about the skill and what is your evidence to support it, okay? So even though the questions seem easy, some of you are still struggling with the evidence for support. Without the evidence, I'm just going to be honest with you, it's wrong, okay? Because I can't tell, was it a lucky guess, or do you really understand what's going on, okay? So here we go. We have, what is Brian's secret? So today, we learn what the secret is, okay? So to me, tell what Brian's secret is. So I want you to tell me, what is that secret? Got to remember, you got to think, is my answer complete? Is my answer correct? Does my answer have evidence? These are the big things you need to get that 100, okay? That's what we're shooting for at all times. Complete, correct, have evidence, that support to make the answer whole. Now, what does Brian's dream about the secret tell you about him? So now we're really wanting to learn a character trait about Brian. So we're drawing a conclusion about him, basing it with evidence. So I want you to explain what Brian's dream about the secret, what does that tell? And we're going to change the pronoun from you to me. What does that tell me about him? Okay, because we want to make the questions personal to us. What injuries does Brian get when the plane crashes? Okay, so it's giving you the explain here at the end. So normally I would say explain here, but it's already telling us to do that. So I want you to tell me, what are the injuries that Brian gets the plane crashes? Okay. And for how does Brian feel about the crash? Which seems like a weird question. But I really want you to think about that. How does he feel? And there is evidence that supports how he feels. So you're going to tell how Brian feels about that crash. Okay? Because that's very, very important to kind of get that out of the way. Now, for today's reading, let me kind of move my stuff around and look at my lesson plan. You are going to be reading, let's do pages 29 through 32 silently. Okay, that's where I want you to pick up today, 29 through 32. I kind of need to make myself a note. So this is going to be, I'm going to stop here for September 14th. So that I kind of know where I'm picking up tomorrow, okay? So there will be no questions for you to answer today unless, as you're reading and sticky noting, you see any of your team talk questions come up. Because I will tell you that tomorrow it will be answering questions. So if you feel froggy and want to kind of get a start on them, by all means. But it's not a requirement for today. So for today, you should have uploaded your simple solutions assignment. I will be looking for that. And your Quizlet kind of times that are going on. So that's it. I'll see you all back here on Tuesday. All right. See ya.